am here at Alexanderplatz in Berlin. I've been here for a couple of weeks, kind of touring the city. A lot to see here, a lot of history. The city is filled with history, and a lot of it's just recent history. Imagine there was Russian soldiers on this side, and on this side of the road right here. And they saw the plane coming down. You can only imagine what they were thinking. Who is this? Who is this coming in, and who is this, more importantly, who is this flying out? As you can see behind me, Berlin is still a center of power. I'm not exactly sure what this is, but there's a whole, you can see them, there's a whole squadron up. So I'm going to walk from Brandenburg towards the Brandenburg Gate right now. The Brandenburg Gate survived the war, but it did not look like that. It looked a lot worse. And then on to the Reichstag. And then on to the place where Hitler's bunker used to be. This here, this kind of here shows you the bunker. It's the first time I've seen it. I haven't come here before, but it was, you can see it's all, there's like two different levels. It shows the Russian soldier there in his greatcoat, right, that he used. I mean, these guys came from Russia, for crying out. It was cold, very cold there. So you can see it here when it was first built. There's the Russian soldier with his greatcoat, and there you can see what was left of the Reichstag. In this fight alone, I believe that the Russians suffered as many casualties in this battle alone as the United States did in all of its casualties in the Second World War. It was not good stuff. What you have here is a Holocaust memorial right here. That's where the memorial is. And that just right there, a minute's walk, is where it all ended. Where the Second World War all ended. Hello everyone, I am here at Alexanderplatz in Berlin. I've been here for a couple of weeks, kind of touring the city. Oh, a lot to see here. A lot of history. The city is filled with history, and a lot of it's just recent history. Going back to the Cold War especially, the kind of history that I'm really interested in, because I lived it. I was alive during the Cold War. I wanted to see some of these places that I heard about in the news when I was a youngster, and that I read about in my history books, going back to the Second World War, and the Cold War, the divide between East and West Germany, East and West Berlin, and all of that. I've been to Checkpoint Charlie. I've seen portions of the Berlin Wall that are still up, and I have just kind of toured the city. I've seen the Brandenburg Gate, which is part of, that's where I'm headed to now. And I read a book by Anthony Beevor called The Fall of Berlin. Just a fascinating book. Fascinating. And they were talking about the fall of Berlin at the end of the Second World War, when the Soviet Union was beginning its final attacks on Nazi Germany and surrounding the city. I don't think I ever read a more compelling, more fascinating historical drama than that. So I'm going to walk towards the Brandenburg Gate right now, and then on to the Reichstag, and then on to the place where Hitler's bunker used to be. It's not there anymore, but that's one of the reasons why I came to Berlin. I don't want you to think it's the only reason. Berlin is a city filled with culture. It is a cosmopolitan city. It's filled with so many different groups of people from all over the world. You see them here everywhere. You see this reminds me of London in a lot of ways. You see people speaking different languages, and all kinds of different food shops and everything. And the place is just kind of, I don't know, a melting pot, a warm, welcoming place, if anyone ever exists. I guess it's in stark contrast to what you read about in the history books. It's changed a lot If you're wondering, this right here, the part that we're in right now, is part of East Berlin. It's kind of the Soviet zone of occupation, or East Berlin. And we're walking towards Brandenburg Gate, which is kind of a line between East and West. But again, this video is not primarily on the Cold War. It's on the dying days of the Second World War. So we'll have a look-see. As you can see behind me, Berlin is still a center of power. I'm not exactly sure what this is, but there's a whole, you can see them, there's a whole squadron of police officers, and they're escorting, I don't know, I saw a bunch of guys who were in suits get into these vehicles over here. As you can see them, I don't know who they were, but there's either something going on here or there's a protest usually going on right in front of me. But I'm showing you this again. This is behind me, the Unter den Linden. That's under the linden trees. And then in front of me, I'll show you. Right there, if you can see it, that is the Brandenburg Gate. So when we're talking about the fall of Berlin at the end of the Second World War, what we're talking about is this road right here on this side, and then on the other side is kind of the east-west axis of Berlin, right? So that it goes it goes from east, which is behind me, west that way, and the Russians were trying to surround it. So let me just show you. The Russians came in from that side. They're coming in towards the Spree River, which is just on the other side of those buildings. And then they were also coming in from the other side in the Tiergarten, which is where we're headed to now. And they were kind of snapping closed and trapping everybody, you know, all of those unlucky enough to stay in Berlin. They were trapping them there. They wanted to, and they were keeping the other allies out. Again, Berlin was a prize that the Soviet Union wanted for itself. It didn't want to share in the glory of taking the capital of the Third Reich with anyone else. Again, there's always some kind of political protest here, and this is a very popular spot for you know, for people, you know, for the spontaneous music and all of that. But as you can see, as we get past here, I tend to think that what I'm about to tell you about now occurred beyond the gates, along this avenue right here. So as we go through the Brandenburg Gates, you can see that there is a long, you know, the roadway continues on the other side. As the Russians were moving in, all of the grandees had left after Hitler's birthday. I don't want to call it a party, it wasn't, but they left, they took off. But there were a few that were very loyal to Hitler. One of them was Albert Speer. He became Minister for Armaments and Ammunition later in the war. He around April 22nd, 1945, he decided that he had parted company with Hitler on his birthday in a way that he didn't like. So what he did was, and again I tend to think it happened here, was he flew in an aircraft and he landed here because Berlin was just about totally surrounded by this time. He landed here along this road right here, and he went this way over towards Hitler's bunker, which is over that way. We'll go there later on. He went there to tell Hitler, because Hitler had ordered him. He issued what was called the Nero order, which was to basically scorched earth policy, to destroy all of the infrastructure in Germany, the bridges and the railways and all of the factories and all of that, so that when the Allies came, there would be nothing left. Speer claimed that he disobeyed this order because Germany needed, they needed something to to sustain them after the war, to sustain the people, that the people didn't deserve to go through any of those things. And I say this because Speer, I read about the Nuremberg trials after the war, after Germany surrendered and people were being held responsible for what they did during the war. Speer was one of those persons. And Speer, when he was reworking the German economy to produce more armaments, he used slave labor. And he was, we know now that he was likely aware of what was going on, and that the people that he was using were being worked to death, that they were being starved, that they were being mistreated, and all of those things. But he claimed he didn't know any of that. And he also claimed that he tried to assassinate Hitler, that he tried to put some poison into his the ventilation when Hitler was in the bunker towards the end of the war. He was trying to put poison into the air vent, but he couldn't do it because somebody had put a fence around it. And one of his detractors, who was also at Nuremberg, said that they didn't have ladders. He couldn't find a ladder to do it. So again, Speer, a lot of the people at Nuremberg were hanged, and Speer was trying to prevent, to get himself out of a very bad situation. He's trying to prevent himself from experiencing the death penalty, as it were. So, he concocted a plan to kind of save his life, and it worked, believe it or not, because he got 20 years. I mean, he was as guilty or more guilty than a lot of those folks there. But he got 20 years, and he ended up at Spandau prison for that time period, and he survived that, and he went on to live reasonably good life afterwards, basically using money that he made from stolen artwork that he had access to from during the war. According to the Nazi line of succession, Hermann Goering was the next in line to be Führer, or whatever you wanted to call him. And he realized that Hitler was surrounded by the Russians, and he thought, well, if he's surrounded by the Russians, maybe I should take control, right, of the Reich and negotiate with the Allies. He's again probably trying to save his own neck. And Hitler did not like that. He had Goering arrested and had his replacement fly in to Berlin a little bit later, believe it or not, and probably either here on the Siegesallee, which is not called anymore, right, or on the Unter den Linden. I tend to think it's on the Siegesallee because there weren't so many trees there, right? I guess at least not down the center, and it was kind of a manufactured landing strip right there for them to all come in. I can't even see it in my mind's eye. I was going to say I can, but I really can't. I mean, you see the vibrancy of Berlin now. You can see all of the trees and everything. You can see even the Brandenburg Gate. It survived the war, but it did not look like that. It looked a lot worse. But and all of the buildings around were just in such disrepair. It was, I shouldn't say disrepair. They were just, they were damaged because of the war and because of the battle that was raging around them. But I always found that to be fascinating. Can you imagine there was Russian soldiers on this side and on this side of the road right here, and they saw the plane coming down. You can only imagine what they were thinking. Who is this? Who is this coming in, and who is this? More importantly, who is this flying out? It was one of the grandees was Hitler himself, and I'm sure that they were terrified that the prize that they wanted, which was Hitler, was getting away. He was getting out of there. So, but he didn't. He did not. So I just came up from the Brandenburg Gate, which is about, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 minutes behind me. It's not that far away. And I came right over here to the massive Reichstag building. That's this right here. I mean, it's huge. What you're seeing here is kind of the shell of the exterior is the shell of what it was before 1933, which was about the time that it was at least the interior part of it was burned. It was burned down, or the interior was burned. And what happened there is that, well, it's not clear who burned it, but the Nazis blamed the communists, and Hitler used that as an excuse to give himself special powers, basically dictatorial powers. That's where the kind of his dictatorship started from. But the building itself was not used again. It was just kind of stood there, kind of the shell of it. And if you can see on top, there is a dome. The very top, that's the new dome that has been put on more recent times. But if you can see them, you can see the people in front of it. It is a massively huge building, and it really was symbolic of the German capital of Berlin. But this was it. This represented that, and that being also the capital of the Third Reich. And if you look over there, you can see over there, that is the bridge. I'm not sure if that is the bridge, but that is the spot of the bridge where the Russians were attacking towards the Reichstag. That's what they were doing. They, the Germans had rigged the bridge, either that one or the one that was that it replaced. They had rigged it to blow it up, so that the Russians couldn't cross it into on their way to the center there of the city. But they didn't do a good job, and it was still passable by infantry. And they were able to get across under heavy fire and form a bridgehead over here. This is they got across here, formed a bridgehead here, and the fighting was extremely intense. But I just wanted to show you that part. I'm going to go ahead and waste some batteries here and tell you a little bit about the battle. The Russians were really huge victims of the Nazis during the Second World War. They had really suffered. The people, the soldiers, I mean, just terrible. I think it was 25 million Russians had died, and they were wanting to. I don't know how to say it any other way. They're wanting some revenge. Maybe rightly so. I don't know. That's I did not experience what they experienced. And if you ever read anything about what happened in Ukraine and Russia and Belarus and the Baltic states, and all of that was part of the Soviet Union at the time. But they, those places, they were under, a lot of them were under Nazi occupation, and the people there just really suffered terribly. As in any place that the Nazis occupied, the Jews most certainly suffered under Nazi rule and occupation. And so when the Russians were finally, here at the capital of the Reich, they were not happy. They were I shouldn't even chuckle at that. They were dirt poor. They had when they got to Germany, they were and they went into East Prussia. They looked at if you look at East Prussia, it's a German part of the Third Reich. It's part of Germany. East Prussia is. It was springtime, and there were apple orchards, and there was food to pigs and cows and chickens and smoked meats in the larders of the East Prussians and the Germans that lived there. And the Russians were just outraged by it. They were just like, if you went to these little peasant farms and in Russia, and they had, you would see that they had very little. It was interesting that they got to send back these parcels back home from the Russian soldiers did. They looted a lot of the German homes and the places that they came upon, and they were allowed to send a parcel back every so often. It was a limit of a certain number of a certain weight, but they would send all kinds of things back. They would send clothes and all of that, but they would also send things like light bulbs. They'd never seen them before, and they would just interesting. They would send them back to their families, but they didn't have any electricity, so they couldn't use them. I know I read somewhere that they didn't know what flushing toilets were. It is kind of funny in a way to say that they thought that they were potato cleaners, that they were there to clean potatoes. That's what made sense to them. we can chuckle at their ignorance, but these, again, it's just a point to show how really poor these people were. They didn't have much, and when the Nazis came, they wanted to take it all. Right? It was Lebensraum, as the Germans called it, living space, and the Russians were considered Slavs, which is where we derive the word slave from. But the Germans thought that they were Untermensch, which means a subhuman kind of thing. But right in here, I'm going to show you here now. As the Russians came from that direction where we were at, that was where the big battle was. And if you're talking about the fighting from there all the way here, it was very intense. At the end of April 1945, the beginning of May, this would have been just a fire zone. And as they were coming across, they kept on being stopped by German resistance, including, if you look over that way, above those trees on the other side over there, was where and it's still there to this day, it's the Berlin Zoo. And at the Berlin Zoo, there was this flak tower that was there. It was huge ferro concrete structure. It's right over there, again above the trees. And it had these anti-aircraft guns. And the anti-aircraft guns were aimed from there all the way over here. And it was temporarily stopped the Russian advance as they were trying to get across, right? And it's really interesting, the story behind it, because as the Russian troops were coming right over here, one of the officers was looking around over this way, and he looked over here, and he was telling his superiors, he was telling them, I can't get to the Reichstag. He said, I can't find it. There is a building in the way. There's this big building in the way. And what his superior told him was, probably cussed at him or whatever, but told him, this dude, that is the Reichstag. I just think that he couldn't believe that he was that close to it. So they fought their way across here in Königsplatz, right here, all the way to the Reichstag, right there. And again, it was just a brutal battle. In this fight alone, I believe that the Russians suffered as many casualties in this battle alone as the United States did in all of its casualties in the Second World War. It was not good stuff. And it's a very interesting story about how they captured it and all of the crazy things that went on inside when they did. The Germans were retreating both upward and downward. Sometimes they were retreating into the basement. Sometimes they were retreating upwards and upwards and upwards. As the Russians kept taking level by level, there was a story that I read about that there were a group of Russian soldiers standing around something, and then all of a sudden they stepped away, and what they were actually doing was they had discovered a hole in the ground, and in the room beneath them were some German soldiers, and all of them had a grenade, and they had pulled the pin on the grenade and they had dropped it into the hole beneath them. On the unsuspecting German soldiers beneath. And this was a brutal fight for this building right here. Again, the exterior of it survives. The dome is new, as I said, and that was the place where the Russians wanted to plant their flag by May 1st. And I will say this: that according to the Soviets, right, the people there were just not clear on it, because I mean it was such a contested area. There was a flag that was placed on the cupola, which is that dome on the top, by May 1st. The battle for the building wasn't even over then. It still carried on because of the intensity of the defenders, who were Nazi fanatics. And all of that. It was very difficult for them to surrender. So as you can see behind me, that is the Brandenburg Gate, which seems to be kind of the axis on which all of these events occurred. Right? I'm headed to the Soviet War Memorial because it's not that far out of my way. It's only about a 5 or 6 minute walk from where I am right now. Is that all of these places all of the kind of the last scenes of the Third Reich really occurred within walking distance of it's a day's walk from one point in the at least the central part of the city to another. If anybody's ever been in Berlin, you know that Berlin is a sprawling city. It is just sprawling. It just, I have a map of the city in a book that I was reading about the end of the Second World War, and it shows it what it looked like back then. And then as I look at the map of where I'm staying and all of the rest of Berlin, it's just grown. It's really a huge huge city. But let me just show you this here. As we can see, this is the Soviet memorial to their soldiers who died taking this building. And I'm going to show you something really cool. Let me just go past, and I'll show you in a second. But you can see this is a T-34 tank, and there's one of these flanking on either side here. You see this one, and you can see another one over there. If you take a look at them, you see how surprisingly, at least to me anyway, how small they are. It's not very large, but this tank right here was arguably the best tank of the Second World War. I know that American tanks, the Sherman tanks that we sent, were they weren't exactly meant for to be the best tank. They were just meant to be the most tank, because they fit onto those transport ships that we had because we had to bring them across the Atlantic. So we stacked them up into these little narrower spaces, but they had kind of a high profile. And American soldiers called them Zippos because it tended to light up like a Zippo when they were hit by by other tanks. But this is the T-34, and it really, when you say that, I mean, you see the small gun on it. It's got a low profile, right? It's not a higher profile. It's kind of sits lower to the ground. The thing about the tanks is that their great strength was that they were reliable. They didn't break down that much, and when they did, the mechanic could jump out of it and look under the hood, wherever that was, and basically figure things out and get it going again. They were very, very reliable, very sturdy. They did not have the same kind of firepower or the strength of the King Tiger tanks that the Germans have. Those King Tiger tanks, I mean, they used a gallon of petrol per mile. They were gas guzzlers, and their armaments and all of the engineering was very intricate, and they tended to break down a lot. So you couldn't drive them across the country, right? You had to kind of get them as close to the battlefield as you could on a train or something like that before they could be interested in battle. But that was every American soldier who fought on the European continent could always hear the rolling of the King Tiger tanks coming along. But I think the Germans, the German soldiers, it was the T-34. That was their nightmare tank. And you can see, well, let me just show you. I can't do it too quickly. I don't want to be too disrespectful. It shows the Russian soldier there in his great coat, right? That he used. I mean, these guys came from Russia, for crying out. It was cold, very cold there. But this is a very respectful and a beautiful memorial to their soldiers. And it was built here, basically in the shadow of the Reichstag for a reason, right? And the Soviets were very proud of what they had done, what they had accomplished in getting here. It's now it's maintained by the German government here. You don't see too many visitors. Most of the visitors that come here are Russians, believe it or not. So I'm going to come down, and I wanted to show you a picture that I kind of went past. I don't know if you can see it right over there. You can see the top of the Reichstag building. Again, this was it was built in the shadow of the Reichstag for a reason. And I'll show you the picture that they have here. Hopefully the reflection isn't too difficult. Almost everything here is in German and in English, so you can see it here when it was first built. Get it up close. There's the Russian soldier with his greatcoat, and there you can see what was left of the Reichstag. This is what was left of the Reichstag after the Battle of Berlin, after it had been burned again in 1933, and then during the Battle of Berlin, this was what it looked like. They struggled. You can see up there, probably that's where they were trying to get the Soviet flag there. So let me see if I can read it. It's the Traces of the War in Berlin, Burial Memorial Site in Tiergarten. Gravesite for more than 2,000 Soviet soldiers who were killed in April and May of 1945 in the Battle of Berlin, and a memorial of the Soviet Army for the final victory over National Socialism erected in the summer and fall of 1945. Dedicated on November 11, 1945, handed over to Germany by the Soviet Army in December 1990. The memorial is cared for and maintained by the federal state of Berlin. Berlin does not want to forget its past. It wants to make sure that everyone remembers it. It's not turning away from it. It's saying this is what it was, and we can't forget it. So again, I'm walking back towards the Brandenburg Gate, and then on to I'm going to head on back towards Hitler's bunker in the last of his days, and the last days of the Reich. So all the major events at the terminal gate of the war in Europe, they happened just within a couple mile radius of the Brandenburg Gate. It's the gate itself is kind of an eerie marker to me, at least anyway. It really just stands there, just mute, right, as all history kind of occurs around it. And if you look this way here, what you have here is a Holocaust memorial right here. I'm not gonna go onto it. I've been here before. This is a Holocaust memorial, and there's a museum that's over there. I remember when I came, there was this. He was an American, but he got up on one of these blocks here to take pictures, and one of the curators that was here told him to get down, that it was, that's not allowed, because they wouldn't have respect for the memorial itself. You can see each alley is just each way in between these stones is a perfect straight line, but there is it's almost hidden. If you go, I think maybe close to one of these pathways right here, you can see there's the museum is underneath, and it just tears your heart out. The museum does it, because it tells the story of these families that were there together, and who they were before the war, and how they were taken away. The Roma, or the Gypsies, Jews, all those victims of the Nazis. And it has, some of their letters that they wrote, just heartbreaking, the intense fear that you could sense for them, how much they loved each other. And I remember reading one of the letters, and it was talking about, there was a girl, she was young, I think she was 12 or 13, and she was writing to her father, and she was telling him that they were murdering people, and that she was afraid because they were throwing some of the children onto the fires alive. And you just cannot imagine. You just cannot imagine having to deal with that. I don't know of what happened to her, because we just have those last letters, and all of the witnesses to that are either dead or keeping their mouths shut. I guess just stuff that again, it just strikes at your heart like nothing else. So anyhow, I better keep going. I was walking past the memorial there, the museum. I said, I'm just going to keep going. I remember Winston Churchill talking about, if you're going through hell, keep going, he said. Right, it's good advice, I guess. It just it seems inadequate under these circumstances. At least the circumstances that these Jews and all the other victims, the Roma and the Russians and the Catholics and all the other victims of the Nazis. It's hell nobody wants to go through. I'll say that Berlin actually capitulated on May the 2nd. So it was not that far. It was you're talking about the battle of the Brennan for the Reichstag. That was kind of ended on the 1st of May, right? The very next day was when you had the official capitulation. Not everybody surrendered, but those that were in charge surrendered. And where we're going was where kind of the unofficial end of the Third Reich. It's where Hitler was. It was where one of his minions, I guess you can call him. I should use that term. One of his sycophants, Goebbels, was with him, and he was basically in charge there after Hitler died, and he was the one who was trying to negotiate not a surrender, but a ceasefire between Russia or the Soviet Union and Germany. But the Russians or the Soviets would have none of it. This was something that they were, they wanted unconditional surrender. That was what they were interested in. This was a brutal ending there, but anyhow, we're almost there. So this is it right here. It's about where you could see it, right? Well, you can't see it. This is it. It's this parking lot here. That's where the bunker is. Kind of where the high drama that took place at the end of the Second World War. So right here is kind of like where the Reichschancellery is. It's not here anymore. It's where the kind of the real seat of government was. There in the garden area, Hitler built a bunker. But this kind of here shows you the bunker. This is the first time I've seen it. I haven't come here before, but it was. You can see there's like two different levels, right? You have I think this is the upper level, and then it goes down into this lower level that you have here, and you have the kind of the air intake. I think this is where Speer was supposed to have tried to poison Hitler. We don't know how true that is. If you take a look here, there's the Brandenburg Gate up there, right? And I walked down this area here and came down this way, and this is where the bunker is right there. That's where it is. It's where we are. So I guess it'd be kind of in this little tiny enclosed area, this very enclosed right around this where the sign is. And I think that back in the 1980s, they kind of dug into it and blew it up. You can see parts of it here. Let me just show you, see if you can see it. That was where Hitler was supposed to have been burned after he committed suicide, and that's the interior of what it must have looked. It must have looked better than that, but that's after the Russians had occupied it. And again, this is kind of the interior is had all kinds of stuff inside. It had a generator, had stocks of food and diesel to run the generators and everything. But this was it. Again, I don't think that this really gets much. People visit it much, but this is it. This is kind of a ignominious, if I get that word correct, end to it. Just tell you a few things about what happened there. Was that in the bunker? If you ever seen the movie, there's a movie called I can't remember. It's a German movie, but it talks about what happened in the bunker, and it's just pretty historically accurate. The books that I've read about it. are kind of mirrored in that movie. But Hitler was down there with his, I don't know, his mistress is what the book calls it, was Eva Braun. And 2 days before he committed suicide, I believe he committed suicide on May 28th, he married her. And she insisted on calling herself Ava Hitler after that. She was so proud of the fact. But when I read the story about what happened there, it was the most dramatic thing that I had ever read in my life. It was like the Third Reich was experiencing what an apocalypse would be like. Everything that they ever knew, everything was coming to an end in this, this whirlwind of fire and explosions and just pure cruelty. The stories after story after story about what happened, about they captured a German officer and he could play the piano, and they made him play the piano, and they kind of showed him, because he didn't speak German, they said in sign language, kind of signing to him, saying that once he stopped playing it, they were going to execute him. So he played and he played and he played as long as he could until he collapsed on the piano keys, and the Russians or the Soviets slapped him on the back and saying good try and all of that. They took him away and they executed him. It was just horrible, terrible. That's what it is. And I'm telling you all of this in front of the Holocaust memorial. Again, no one suffered more than the Jews at that time period. And that's where the memorial is. And that right there, a minute's walk is where it all ended. Where the Second World War all ended. Probably a good place as any to end this video. So.